It's time for Trench Talk, for your weekly infusion of metal and otherwise heavy music. I am your host, Flight of Icarus from MetalTrenches.com. As always, if you're new here, please do hit that subscribe button and give us a like. Kicking things off today, we're going to start by talking about Slovakian progressive death metal duo Ceremony of Silence with their impressive debut album, Audis, via Willowtip Records. Ceremony of Silence are a band I would recommend to fans of Barus, Abyssal, and Gorguts, among others. This album is reportedly the result of countless hours immersed in free-flowing improvised jams, which certainly comes through on the somewhat Gorgutsian, if you will, passages of technical fury. In these moments, the musicianship skills are totally undeniable. They've got both, cyborg-like proficiency, and yet also a very organic kind of sense of humanity in how they play their music. So Ceremony of Silence know how to kind of put a saddle on their wild sense of creativity with this smooth, dynamic songwriting that really has a great flow throughout the course of the album. In Freudian psychology, there's actually a concept of the id, which is sort of your inner impulse-driven, pleasure-seeking drive that we all have. And without proper restraint, our lives will sort of devolve into gluttony and depravity. And so that opening you heard at the top from Invocation of the Silent Eye, as well as this excerpt from Black Sea of Draught, I feel like are perfect illustrations of putting a chain on that beast, so to speak. The album is also inspired by themes of mysticism and death, says drummer Svatogor, which I'm sorry I butchered your name. Audis deals with a mythical path of a man, a confrontation with his innermost self and his direct experience of ultimate perennial wisdom, while releasing all his attachments to the mundane world. Various stages of this path are concealed in a series of metaphorical visions that add another layer to the music itself. And true to that backdrop, the album is very much a dark and atmospheric labyrinth with many twists and turns. So in addition to those raging blast beats and dissonant riffs and imposing death growls that you already heard, the band also takes some awesome detours into doom and post-metal. Frequently, this eerie fusion kind of left me thinking that I should be listening by candlelight instead of just driving in my car or, sort of day-to-day stuff. I actually posted a meme I saw making fun of bands that call their live shows a ritual, and they even described it as like a form of birth control. But in this case, I thought about it again, and I just feel like the word seems somewhat appropriate here. It does feel like more of a ritualistic thing. It's less mosh pit music and more of sort of a dark meditation on par with the likes of Deathspell Omega. Furthermore, the subtle melodic elements invoke a strange state of simultaneous gloom and tranquility, which, given the concept that I described, it seems pretty appropriate because, as they put it, it's a confrontation of the innermost self. And so if we're really going inside and seeking the best parts of ourselves, there's a lot of internal filth to sort of wade through on the way to enlightenment. The resulting mood is one that I've almost exclusively attributed to Abyssal in the past. Few other bands have this particular mix of imposing, suffocating death metal with also that sense of beauty and hope. But this is a band, Abyssal, that hasn't dropped an album since 2015. But let me tell you, if you've not already heard them, consider this another very important shout out. Their previous album, Anticatastasis, was what I believe was my album of the year in 2015. And so if you haven't heard that yet, don't even listen to it. Just buy it. Go to Bandcamp and just hit the buy button. You won't regret it, especially if you're enjoying what you're hearing from Ceremony of Silence. But again, given that they haven't put out an album since 2015, I believe that I've heard that they're working on some new stuff, but I'm more than happy in the meantime for another band like Ceremony of Silence to really fill that void and expand upon those ideas. Numerous moments on this album have me drawing parallels to everything from Alterage to Malthusian, which I've covered before, but where those bands seem to sort of just spiral into an endless black oblivion, Ceremony leave the faintest hint of light at the end of that tunnel. Now, if I'm really nitpicking, there are a few riffs here and there that get a little repetitious, like on Ceremony of 1,000 Stars. But at 35 minutes, Audis is a pretty tight ship. And any of these moments flow onto bigger, better things before they ever really get a chance to be annoying. You all know me. I like brevity and I like things to be concise. I don't like repetition unless it's done really effectively, and I think Ceremony of Silence do an excellent job of holding it all together in this respect. So in the end, I gave it a 10 for enjoyability. I honestly could not stop listening to this album. I definitely plan on picking up a physical copy. I think just writing the outline for this podcast alone, I must have listened to this on repeat at least 10 times. I gave them a 9 for musicianship, though I am on the fence for a 10. It's rock solid from the songwriting to the performances themselves. I'm just still trying to leave those 10 out of 10 slots for the absolute cream of the crop. You know, things like Artificial Brain, where it's just completely mind-melding sort of stuff. And this is up there, though. This is definitely up there. Finally, it's an 8 for innovation. Again, there are bands this may remind you of, especially if you're familiar with Abyssal, but they put enough of their own spin on it to make a stand. All of this rounding out to a nice solid 9.0, which is an A-, kind of leaning towards an A here. Some mild room for improvement, but overall incredible, especially for a first time. Personal favorite tracks: Invocation of the Silent Eye, Trance of Void, and Black Sea of Draught. In closing, this is one hell of a debut that is sure to make some year-end lists. Definitely mine. I've already added it to my ongoing tracker. It is must-listen stuff. Once more, Audis is out through Willowtip Records on April 15th. But wait, there's more. It's time for shoutouts. And as always, the links for everything that I'm talking about here today are down in the description. First up, we've got Colorado technical progressive black and death metal outfit Suffering Hour with their new EP Dwell via Blood Harvest Records. The band's previous 2017 effort, In Passing Ascension, which I'll also link below, was one of my favorite albums and biggest surprises of that year, with this really intensely atmospheric death metal sound that seems to simultaneously claw at you and also expand from within you, kind of like Portal or Abyssal. The band reports a broad range of influences from Inquisition and Migla to The Chasm and Dead Congregation. And let me tell you, this new EP continues to deliver on that same expansive, eclectic premise, arguably even more so. Made up of just one single 18-plus minute composition, Dwell is first and foremost a journey. It's a journey that one moment seems to tunnel through the darkness of the underworld, and others forcibly pry open your third eye. And I don't care if that sounds corny, that's exactly what this is. I looked at this press release and I saw like one track, oh, it's just a single, and then I saw the length and I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I know what these guys are capable of. And so, I knew I was in for something, and I was not kind of sure at first because it opens very just kind of pure atmospheric, but then that kind of progressive technical death metal aspect kicks in, and this bad boy builds, let me tell you. Appropriately, the press release describes it as a sonic wormhole, a world-devouring miasma of a track that evokes mysticism, the ontological, and transcendence. So again, get Dwell on April 5th on various formats via Blood Harvest and Regain Records. You won't be disappointed. Next up, Absu and Vector meets Opeth and Emperor with Slovenian sci-fi black metal project Teleport. Their new EP is The Expansion, which totally slipped under my radar in September, but now, thankfully, it's being reissued in physical formats via Edge Circle Productions, which is great news for me because it was just another excuse to talk about it, and before I kind of just glossed over it and let people know, hey, this is out, but now I get to put it on the podcast where it belongs. So, Teleport very much deliver a highly entertaining and very re-listenable display of progressive black metal over the course of their previous releases, and now The Expansion also sees the band sort of embracing the more avant-garde songwriting elements of the likes of Imperial Triumphant and Gorguts. It's really a dizzying maelstrom of blistering drums and sorceling guitars and grim vocals that seem to echo on into the eternal firmament. Another shorter release, it's only 3 tracks, but you really get your money's worth. These compositions are really impressive and super engaging. And again, they do this great balancing act of being very technical, very kind of music school savvy, but also just great to keep coming back to and never boring. So one last time, that's Teleport with The Expansion, and that's also coming out April 5th via Edge Circle Productions. Alright, got another one for you here. This is from the Thicket, which is a progressive death metal duo with members communicating between New Zealand and Poland, of all places. Kind of an interesting mashup there. I'd recommend From the Thicket to fans of Meshuggah, Omega Diatribe, and Dark Water's End. Listening to this new album, I have covered these guys before. It's got this great atmospheric quality to it to mix with that groovy overtone. It's kind of like floating in this viscous sea of black ooze where these genty Meshuggah-esque grooves and the post-metal atmosphere combine. I was picturing sort of a music video in my head as I was listening, which to me is a quality of a really solid and immersive album where it's actually conjuring creative ideas in your head. But I was picturing these pale, almost white, naked bodies sort of writhing in this expanse of black oil, and the frame rate kind of speeding up and slowing down, sort of like that movie The 300, and that happening in time with the shifting mathy drum patterns. So very cool aesthetic. And again, you definitely get sucked into it, which is my favorite quality of the album overall. These detuned guitars and sporadic rhythms really command this kind of contorted, interpretive dance. And then on top of that, you've got these layers of eerie, Deathspell Omega-y kind of guitars, and this very just densely suffocating style of production. The lyrical themes touch on narcissism, neglect, control, man's overall propensity for selfishness and harm, as they put it. And the title's actually inspired by the suicide forest in Japan. So needless to say, lots of very kind of negative downer themes. And honestly, you don't really even need to listen to the vocals or read a lyric sheet to pick up on that. The performances and the songwriting convey all these ideas very well just on their own. And there's actually 2 instrumental tracks that close this album out. And again, they cover that negative tone just fine without using any words. So The Black Sea of Trees is out right now. Highly recommend checking it out. Always nice to share kind of a underground of the underground release on this podcast.
To satisfy his need for this will be his only
Alright, so for the rest of the time before we close out here, I thought I'd do something a little bit different and talk about some releases that I'm excited about coming up in the not too distant future, or hopefully so. Some of them are kind of up in the air, but I just want to start the hype train on a few things. First of all, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this next week, but the new Inferi re-recording of their second album is fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. Honestly, if you're a fan of that band, if you're a fan of melodic and technical death metal in general, if you like the Equipoise album, whatever, pre-order that album right now. I will rarely tell you to just go out and buy something without having heard it, but I guarantee you, even if you have the old version of this album, it's not just a reissue. They took the current lineup and they re-recorded the whole damn thing, and I cannot stop listening to it. So again, much more coming on that next week. Chris is supposed to be reviewing the new Inter Arma album. This is a sludge band. I've really enjoyed all of their past releases, especially the last 2. Always enjoyable stuff. Super heavy. Then, of course, there's the new After the Burial. These guys really can't do me wrong, and they're one of the few metalcore bands out there that have been around for a long time that continue to actually top themselves, I think, with each release. Of the metalcore bands I've been listening to for a long time, I think really just After the Burial and August Burns Red are the only 2 that readily come to mind when it comes from still putting out not only good albums, but really just top quality stuff. I thought Dig Deep was perhaps the best album they've done so far. And yeah, just I'm always excited to hear what these guys put out. They're super talented. It's still a bummer that they lost their guitar player due to a lot of stuff going on, including a lot of mental health issues that seem to play into his death. But yeah, very excited to hear more from that. We've actually posted the first single, which has a pretty amusing music video attached to it as well. I can never pronounce this name right, but there's a new Allegian, growing popularity, progressive death metal, technical death metal outfit, kind of a big story. What was it? Last year, 2 years ago, I've sort of lost track, where people were complaining that they were trying to basically create a salary for themselves through crowdfunding. I don't care. Like, if that's your prerogative and you got fans who are willing to support that, then it sounds like people are really just hating. So in any case, though, very talented musicians, solid songwriters. I really enjoyed the previous album. I do feel like I'd like to see more from them in terms of making really memorable songs, because I think, like a lot of tech bands, they can sometimes fall into the category of, like, it's great when you're listening to it, you're super impressed with it, but it doesn't always really stick. In fact, I can't really name for you a song off the top of my head, except for what was that one with the science? It's just like literally science is in the name. That one was one of the singles. But anyways, interested to hear what they put out this time around, especially now that they've got all of this crowdfunding support. We're going to be talking a lot more about the Illusory Self, which is kind of a metalcore, death metal, deathcore band, very eclectic. Know some of the members. Again, I'll be covering these guys more in depth in the future, but they've got a new EP coming out that I quite enjoyed. It's pretty interesting. There's a new Merg album on the horizon, and I gotta be honest, I really didn't like the last one. I loved their debut. It was just very much kind of Swedish black metal, had a lot of kind of similar sound to it as like Thicket. Just really enjoyable, really catchy in this odd way, but also just that classic kind of second wave sound. But yeah, the second album was kind of not super interesting, downright kind of dull, really. Ended up moving from like a high 8 for the first album. I ended up giving like a mid 7, I think, for the next one. So I wasn't sure what to think about it, but I've listened to the whole album a couple of times now, and I think it's a return to form for them. Highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for some good black metal. Super stoked about the new Warforged album finally coming out, or really just Warforged album. These guys have been kind of hyping around on their Bandcamp forever with just singles. As far as I know, they have not put out a full album to date, but they put out just really killer, atmospheric, progressive death metal singles with awesome guitar work, very dynamic, kind of mixing tech death with like more of an Opeth sort of sound. And they're from my hometown of Chicago, so extra points there. I'm hoping to catch these guys for an interview. We'll see what happens, but cannot wait to hear that album. The first single, which we have posted up in our post sections on the website, and you can also find it on their Bandcamp. Amazing. So good. Can't wait for it. Lots of tech death. Also, Veil of Pnath. However you pronounce that, Veil of Nath, Veil of Pnath. I don't know if it's a silent P, but it's Pnath. Loved their last album as well. They're putting out a new EP, although it's like 30 minutes long, so it's a pretty good length release. In fact, I said that it feels like the perfect length for me for what it is. Black Dahlia Murder, Alter Beast, that sort of blackened melodic death metal, but with a little bit more of a technical twist on it. Really concise, perfect album. All right, and then things that are further down the road. Been waiting forever for the follow-up Torrential Downpour album. Hopefully that will come to fruition finally. I've been on and off conversing with those guys for a little bit now, hoping to line up some communication with them, maybe an interview as well. I believe there's a new Arms album in the works, if you're into that more mathcore, grindcore type of stuff. Of course, there's the new Deftones coming out sometime this year. They're saying that it sounds more like White Pony, but my response to that was, I feel like they say that every other album. And I'm pretty sure that's true, because I remember Chino repeatedly using this line, and I don't want to get my hopes up because I've been let down so many times. I like all of Deftones' albums. I was not a big fan of Gore, but nothing can truly compare to White Pony for me. White Pony and Around the Fur, both just like perfect albums from that era that I can listen to over and over and over and over again. I do love No Koi Yokan as well. I think it's up there. I would potentially put that in my top 3 Deftones albums. But in any case, I've been a big fan of these guys for a very, very, very long time. They're among the first metal groups that I got into back in the days when, it was more sort of nu metal and metalcore, and I hadn't yet expanded my horizons into the more extreme genres. Also hoping we'll finally get this gosh darn Absu album. I don't know if it's still happening because I shared that news on a previous episode where things are kind of in flux. I did reach out to Prescriptor McGovern, messaging him, asking him if he could give me an update. Didn't get a response. That's fine. But definitely hoping to hear more on that front because just an incredible, super technical black metal band. One of the best US-based black metal bands that you can find. I believe we're also supposed to get a new Aspherium album. This is another progressive death metal band, kind of more underground, very conceptual based. Their last album was a sci-fi concept album that was really cool. There were some low points, but for the most part, really solid. And I liked it enough that I paid extra to import this album with like a $10 shipping cost and all this just for a CD version of it because I loved the artwork too. So check those guys out. We've of course got this Lord Mantis album on the horizon, coming in the near future. I am actually privy to things that you don't know yet. I know the album title and can't wait for that to come out. I think it's awesome. I've got to sample a few of the songs too because I've gotten a little bit of an inside scoop. Nothing I can share yet, but hopefully some stuff on that soon. But that should be in the not too distant future, and I love what I'm hearing. Hoping it will once again, like Death Mask, be the most demented album of the entire year. We don't even need to talk about the new Tool album. All I have to say on that is I will believe it when I'm holding it in my hands, and then we'll discuss it. Enough said. Finally, just wrapping things up with the number 12 Looks Like You album, one of the best mathcore bands ever. Worse Than Alone is one of my all-time favorite mathcore albums, potentially one of my all-time favorite albums, period. Also love Mongrel. It's been a long time, and I hope they can live up to the hype, because, man, do I have pretty high expectations for this thing. I try to level myself out and just, expect that there's a lot of opportunity there for letdown, and I'm trying to just balance my expectations, but damn, am I excited to hear from that. So that's just a nice handful of things that I'm looking forward to in the future, things you'll definitely be hearing about more and probably hearing samples of on future podcasts, future reviews. And look at that. That took us right about to time. So let me close, of course, in saying if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on a platform besides YouTube, go ahead and go and subscribe to our YouTube as well, because we are sharing other content there that you will not find on the podcast. Film reviews, short album reviews, longer version interviews, things of that nature. Also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vero, and Minds.com. We also have a Bandcamp account that you can follow. Pick up free sampler albums that cover a wide range of underground artists. And I'm really going to make more of a push for, please, if you are one of our regular listeners, if you're somebody who finds yourself consistently coming back, enjoying what we're putting out here, finding new artists as a result, if you feel like there's a value added to Trench Talk and Metal Trenches in general being in your life, then I implore you to contribute to our Patreon account. Even if it's just $1 a month, which is like, a pack of gum? Like, that would make a huge difference, and we've got some tiers up there. Also, if you join at the $5 level, you can hear these podcasts early before anyone else gets to hear the content. At the $10 level, you can also get shouted out here on the podcast. If you want me to do that by name, if you want me to shout out a website or your band or someone else's band or whatever, I am totally open to whatever within reason. But yeah, please consider doing that, because if we're adding value to your music experience, your metal scene, as it were, then I would hope that you'd feel like that was worth some money. I'm not doing this just for that, and God knows I've put way more into this than I've gotten out of it in terms of a financial level. I'm much more interested in the fan feedback, which has always been positive. I'm really thankful for all the emails and messages and general well-wishing, and especially the bands, getting to see them rise from sort of a DIY status to getting signed or, playing bigger shows, touring, expanding their sound. That's what gives me the most enjoyment. And it would also be nice to be able to add to the financial side of this, even if it's just to at least cover basic costs, like when I need to upgrade equipment, or, we're paying a monthly now to have extra time when we're uploading podcasts, all that good stuff. So please do consider that. Again, links to all this are down in the description where you can find it easily. But for now, this is Flight of Icarus, signing off. I will see you in the trenches.